is a good question. How do we call out and confront people that need to be confronted, but also come from a place of power and authority? And she was specifically referencing a situation in the workplace with a boss and a coworker, and then the boss made a racist comment. And how do you like come against that boss?
Yeah, that's hard because and that's, I was just thinking that when I was preparing for this, and Colleen, hopefully I answer your question. If anybody else has an answer to, you can jump in. But I was just thinking this, and I thought this before when it came to right after George Floyd, especially in the summertime, Breonna Taylor. I was like, I'm so glad that I work for myself and I don't have to answer to anybody else, because I don't feel like going in and I want to say what I want to say and I want to post what I want to post, and I don't want anybody else to tell me, and because this is how I feel today. But not everybody has that privilege. Right. And a lot of times people need their job. So we just can't show up and begin to protest or say everything we really want to say to our boss and then go home. It doesn't work that way. But there are ways to have those conversations. And that's what we can begin to talk about. How do I address this with my boss? Which also may not be good to call your boss out. Well, it depends. Sometimes it may be saying, I like such and such and say, I didn't read the whole statement, so I apologize. Or talking about how that made you feel in that moment. Because I imagine you weren't the only one that was uncomfortable. Because a lot of times when we see things, we're not the only one that sees and feels it. It's just that, we're all kind of silently sitting there waiting for somebody else to step up and say. So even in that moment, saying how that made you feel, or in that moment saying, you know what, we have to understand people's differences. And so I think it's about that's the courageous part, is standing up. And that's something that we say we're rooting for. We have to begin to challenge each other and what that looks like. Now, I'm not saying you go back and tell your boss off. I'm not saying that. I don't want anybody to lose a job. But what I am saying, there's space to have those conversations. Because if we don't start standing up and speaking, then we keep letting those things slide. And then it comes to another great example. George Floyd happened. It was at the height, and then we got a little bit quiet. And then Blake happened up, and then Breonna Taylor up, and then we get quiet. Where we have to be consistent in this work. It's not about, let me get relaxed again and get comfy and then get outraged again. It's about saying, I've been doing this. This is what I've been working on. This is how, having those conversations when it's not national headlines, but still being able to address them. But that's a good question, Colleen, because it does get difficult, but it does take somebody to step up and say and to do. Sorry. Rashad, I think it's important to have a groups of countries that I think sometimes we're not comfortable. Yeah. Right. So again, if I can plug my brother's article again, Newsweek, but you guys can go read it. But Rashad talks about, okay, we're not all experts, but when it comes to the life of LaToya Smith, born in Fort Dix, New Jersey, that's me right here. I'm an expert in me, in my experiences, and I can bring my experiences to the table. And I think, Rashad, that part right there, I don't have to be an expert in all statistics and every social justice movement and everything that way, but I could be an expert in me, and I can bring me to the conversation, and knowing and understanding and being confident that I'm helping. The same way I want you all to be an expert in your space, and let's talk and let's have open dialogue. Now, it's not about I'm right, you're wrong, and now we clash, but it's about understanding, let me understand, and now let's begin to grow. And so with that being said, I think we all are experts in that way, because we all have certain experiences and voices that we can bring. Right. I'm sorry, reading through the questions real quick. How can, Susan is asking, how can my practice have a voice for anti-racism in my community, that people have new thoughts and ideas about race? And with that people have new thoughts. Yeah. And I think that comes with Susan. I think everybody can agree to, everybody's community is not the same. Like some people may be in very, maybe diverse areas, maybe urban or country or whatever, right? But it's also understanding the makeup of the community. And that's the kind of things that we could talk about, whether it be one-to-one work that we do or a group work. You have to understand the community too and what's going on in that area, right? You have to understand the population, the various cultures, and then to begin to have those conversations as you flow. It may mean that you change how you market to people. Right? It may mean that you change the groups that you market to. It also means that you begin to change the language that you use when you're addressing certain people. If you want to be more inclusive, your language has to change. You got to show up in different spaces. Maybe if you keep going to, certain chamber events or certain meetings where the same people look the same. Now you got to switch it up and you got to get in front of new faces. So I think a lot of that is almost like an analysis, Susan, of what the community looks like, what your area looks like, and then what it needs. What are the problem points in the community? What are the things that aren't addressed? Like I mentioned a minute ago, if you work in an area where there's a high population of Black girls, and I talked about that article in the New York Times. Okay, and you work with kids, that's a conversation that needs to be had. How do I get in front of these, teachers or educators in the, in the system where we can begin to have these conversations? So I think it's about doing, and that's something that we can do too, an analysis of your area and then moving forward. Mm-hmm. And Susan's on the podcast too, when I do these takeovers. So you can listen out for her episode. It's coming up. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions or statements, or if it feels uncomfortable or if it feels right, or things that you're challenged with? Mm-hmm. That's good. Makisha, I'm trying to look for I'm trying to see your face too, which I guess I have to find you. But I think, 1 second, okay, I'll get to you in a second. But Makisha made a great point about starting to moderate conversations within the Black churches about, Black Lives Matters and what that looks like. And I think that's great. I think it's great to begin to have those conversations. I think it's also safe spaces where people's voices can be heard. Because a lot of times too, when we get bothered, when we get upset, it's because I feel like you can't hear me. Or I feel like I'm saying the same old thing and nobody can understand. But to have that space, and there are spaces too where we can feel free to talk, right? And to feel free to just be. And so, Makisha, I think that's excellent that you're pushing the conversation forward in that way and holding those conversations. Let me see. Kel, right? Am I unmuting you, or you can unmute yourself? There you go.
Yeah, thank you. Along the lines of like safe spaces and people feeling safe to speak, and learn and share these ideas. Something that's come up with me, excuse me, with friends, with even clients is people feeling shame for like not doing things or not doing enough. And I appreciate you speaking before about like the example of in the workplace, if your boss is saying something racist, some people might not feel safe to respond to that or speak up. And I've experienced like some shame by mostly white friends, with me saying, well, some people, including me, may not feel safe in any situation where something racist is going on to speak out and to have a voice for those people that don't have a voice. And the people that are in a place of privilege like me wouldn't necessarily always feel safe to do that. And then there's like shaming that's going on around like, well, you have to always be doing something. You have to be posting, you have to be, donating money, you have to be speaking, you have to be doing all these things. But it's like, I can't do those things all the time, for one. And even when I can, it might not always be safe. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about the shaming and how that comes up for people and how people can feel more safe to just like express these things.
Yeah, and I think, you know what, Kel, right? I'm saying that right?
Mm-hmm.
Kel, okay. I think you made a good point because I'm very quick to say, because I think I just said it, we should all be speaking up, we should all be doing. And that's me personally in my charge. And that's where I'm at. Like, okay, let's talk, let's do, let's be. But your example of sharing your experience and how you feel right there is exactly what I'm talking about in these type of communities. Okay, well, I may not feel comfortable to lead the charge and have that conversation just yet. But I think, again, it comes with letting your voice get stronger. Would you say so too? Like the stronger you get on the topics or the more you do speak, you do become stronger and more confident in beginning to speak up. Would you say that?
That's probably true, because I doubt that I would have brought this specific question up, say I had gone to a training like this, 3 months ago.
Right. So that being said, you're in a different space than you were 3 months ago, because there is some push within you that you're doing the work. And I think the more the more we have the conversations and the more we include ourselves in those spaces, we're going to be more confident to begin to speak. And just because you don't talk, you don't show up at the meeting, and you may not talk how I'm going to talk, doesn't mean that your voice is not powerful in what you're going to be saying. Right. So I think that's the idea too. Like the more you hear it, the more you're around it, the more you begin to speak. There is that space. And then when you allow, again, that's Brene Brown plug too, right? Where we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, that shame does decrease. But again, it's going forward and not shying away from it. At the same time, when you do use your voice like that, if we're talking about growing and working together, it's not my place to shame you for speaking, but to thank you for using your voice. And now it's my place to, again, in an intentional community, to help build you up and to help you understand. And now ask what you think, or I'll make it say, okay, well, tell me your thoughts about it. Right. But I love the idea, and the fact that you showed up here lets me know that, okay, I'm willing to get uncomfortable to do this greater work. Right. I think that's a great point. Because again, I know that Kel gave the question, but I can imagine she's not the only one with that experience or that question. Riley,
can I add one more thing really quick? I just want to add, like at the beginning, after George Floyd happened, this came up in the context of like people saying you have to respond to the violence with violence. Okay. And I was just like, no, like that goes against everything I'm against. Like I'm for peace. Like if you're upset with violence, why would you respond with more violence? Like that. And so that came up, and people, white people mostly, were trying to shame me for that opinion. And I was just like, no. And so I feel I don't know. It comes up in these really serious ways. And it's like, no one should ever be shamed for being peaceful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. I think so too. I think it was Dr. King again that said, writing is the voice of the unheard, right? So sometimes there's this aggression that comes forth when I don't feel heard in what I'm saying. So again, that's a lot of what's going on with the riots. Okay, well, we'll have peaceful protests, but listen, you're mad at me if I protest, you're mad at me when I don't protest. You're mad at me when I speak, you're mad at me when I don't speak. Like you said, so a lot of times too, it's a lot of emotion that comes forth because there aren't spaces where people can speak. But if that's how you want to move and yours is more peaceful, then that's your space.